So maybe you're familiar with the Stauffers. They were family vloggers who were wildly popular for posting their lives online, including their adoption story. But things took a complicated turn. Today on Commotion, how a new docu-series explores the dark side of family vlogging. I'm Radheyan Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, so this story is really heartbreaking. It begins with Micah and James Stauffer, a family from Ohio who, built a YouTube empire, posting their lives online, posting their parenting, their pregnancies, their daily lives, and their channel really took off when they adopted a 3-year-old child from China and named him Huxley, and he became a regular feature on their YouTube channel. But then one day he disappeared, and after facing intense scrutiny, the Stauffers admitted that they had rehomed Huxley. Essentially, they said they found him a forever home because they couldn't cope, they couldn't deal with the challenges that his autism presented. A new docu-series is exploring that story. It's called An Update on the Family. It's currently playing on Crave. Amil Niazi, Jen Sookfong Lee have seen it. They're here with me to talk about it. Hello, Amil and Jen.
Hi.
So listen, this again, so much to talk about with this, but Amil, let's begin with just the Stauffers. They're no longer on YouTube after facing that intense backlash from this story. Can you explain why people actually just fell in love with the Stauffers and then why people were so outraged by what happened to Huxley?
Yeah, they were putting out so much content. I think in today's world, you would be overwhelmed by the amount of vlogging they did, but they really took people through their entire experience from, getting together, every pregnancy announcement, every, pregnancy disappointment. They were really, really sharing their entire life. It was such an intimate connection that people had with them. So when I hate saying words like rehomed and forever homed. It's like, this is not a pet. This is a human being. So when they, gave Huxley up, people felt betrayed. They really felt betrayed. They were such a part of his journey, very emotional journey from China over to Ohio. You felt how difficult this would be for Huxley. And yet they position themselves as the victims in all of this. And I think that people just could not deal with that. And I'm not surprised that they've never returned to the internet.
Right. And Jen, when you hear that and when you watch the series, how did you feel about all of this?
I think when you watch the series, you go through a lot of emotions, but I think the series is set up to make us hate the Stauffers. I don't think there's any other real alternative for the viewer. No one is going to like this, cute white family who adopts and then discards a little boy from China. No one's going to like this story. And it's really hard not to feel sort of betrayal and all that stuff on behalf of Huxley, who obviously, experienced the trauma of being relinquished by his birth family and then has been relinquished a second time. This is really, really difficult stuff. I worked in social services and adoption for many years, and I wrote a lot about it. And the only thing that actually surprised me about this story was the money part, not the adoption part, oddly.
Well, yeah. Speaking of the money part, Amil, look, the Stauffers, their adoption journey was, followed by hundreds of thousands of people. And here's an example of how they monetized it.
So in order to bond with Huxley, I decided to use Dreft baby detergent. Dreft baby detergent has this scent just like a newborn. So when I'm cuddling a 3-year-old baby boy, I can still feel like I'm snuggling that brand new baby. And I get that baby scent that I never got from my son.
It gave me chills. Listen, Amil, what does the docuseries say about monetizing or turning your family into a business in this way?
Yeah, it's a really, really, I think, like you said, chilling example, but really important example of sort of the tension that we're in today with family vloggers, because now we sort of see the consequences of monetizing your children, of revealing every single aspect of your family life, which is usually very private and intimate between the people in the family. These children cannot consent to having their entire lives shown to millions of people. And certainly they don't consent to having their adoption journey turned into a commercial for detergent. And so I think we're really seeing how it affects children, how horrible it can be for the family, because they've been banished. Do you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I can't even imagine. They were going from making quite a bit of money. Jen mentioned the money aspect being so surprising. Like, these family influencers, we call them influencers now, not vloggers, they make the good ones make so much money. It's unbelievable.
Mhm.
They had their entire income taken away because of this. And so I think we're really just now starting to see how this business impacts the people involved. And I really do think we're in a sort of a crisis moment, and people are starting to say maybe that they shouldn't be doing this. Maybe no one should be doing this.
Yeah, and I think, like, there's been stories that came out since then, since the Stauffers, where there was a mom who was coaxing the tears out of her child
Yes.
the real tears of her child when they were putting down their dog, and the child's like, she's like, oh, could cry for the camera. He's like, but I am crying. I'm really crying here, right? And so,
Or Ruby Frankie,
right,
I think a lot of listeners will be familiar with Ruby Frankie's story and how she presented this perfect family, and behind the scenes there was alleged abuse going on.
hmm
And so I think, we're really seeing what happens behind the scenes, and maybe it's not as perfect as it's been presented.
yeah, it's a story that's going to keep continuing. Now, Jen, I mean, you mentioned that you worked for support agencies for families that are going through adoption. You also worked with, foster care and raising children with disabilities. I mean, what did this series bring to mind for you in terms of on that front?
Yeah, so much. And also, I should say, not all newborns smell the same. That little clip like us, like they
That's
all
true.
smell different, Anyway, the thing about this for me was that international adoptions, right, became a big business. Like that's a money-making enterprise too for governments and agencies. And those became big business sort of like in the 1980s, starting then, even though they had always existed. And the children who come from those countries typically have experienced a lot of things, including conflict, war, political turmoil, institutionalization, many, many things. And those children came from places, Korea, Haiti, Romania, China is a big business right now. I think sometimes, and this was so prevalent in this particular series, that North Americans can kind of forget that these children will have complex needs. They forget that they will probably have things like disabilities and, PTSD and mental health issues. And they actually aren't blank slates. They're not just a blank, cute, ethnic looking child that's going to come into your home. And this series really reminded me of that, how challenging the adoption journey can be for the adoptive family, for the adoptee, how an international adoption is not just about making sure, you celebrate Lunar New Year and you get a cute outfit for your kid. It's also about addressing like all the things that the child has experienced and now needs at all the various ages as they grow up. And it really made me so very sad to see how little it appeared how little they were addressing Huxley's needs throughout sort of their parenting vlogging.
Right, right. Well, look, Jen, like the Stauffers, obviously, they didn't, participate in this documentary. They didn't give any interviews. But one influencer who was interviewed, she's kind of like the anchoring voice of the series, Hannah Cho, because she is a YouTuber. I think she does put her family life online, but she's also an adoptee from Korea. Can you tell me what does her perspective add to this series?
I mean, I felt like she was the real moral center of the series. And it was like when it started, she spends a lot of time on the internet. But then as time went on and she started like revealing a little bit more about herself and her reaction to Huxley's adoption and then the dissolution of his adoption, I really felt that she was the one experiencing the emotions on behalf of the viewer. It's like she was someone adopted from Korea into like a white American family. And it became very clear that what Huxley was going through brought up a lot of really complicated emotions that she was having too about all of these things that we're talking about. And I think that she was really important to include because Huxley obviously is not in this series either. And she was the voice for him, which I really, really liked. I mean, a lot of these adopted children are not old enough or to have to be able to speak for themselves. So she could do it for him, or at least on behalf of adoptees and what he might be feeling. And I thought that that was really important.
Yeah, here's like so, Emil. When we know with the Stauffers, like the docuseries, it really stresses how their metrics really went up when they were adopting Huxley, right? Like their channel really took off. And does that make you think of just like celebrities who adopt, like say like Angelina Jolie or Madonna, like how that becomes part of their narrative as opposed to, centering on the child?
Yeah, I mean, you really see that there is a kind of a playbook. We sort of s- make the assumption that this is all just very natural and they're just sharing everything because, they love to tell their story and they want to share their experience so other people can relate to it. But it is a business strategy. They're making a lot of money. She even says at one point in the documentary to another interviewer that she became obsessed with analytics and became an analytics expert. And you can really see that in how she tags everything and the way she, titles and thumbnails. So she's not just, an innocent mom sharing her story. She is an expert at monetizing her experience, and she took a page right out of the celebrity playbook. It's not enough to have 3 4 kids of your own. You've got to bring in this extra layer because at a certain point, I mean, she can only have so many children, but she sees how much pregnancy announcements and that kind of thing really pull in engagement. And so I hate to say it, it sounds so cynical, but it really is just part of a business strategy. And celebrities are the ones that sort of introduce that to the world.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you think about their popularity, like they were beloved. They had lots of fans when they were doing their thing, but then they became way more famous for being hated after all of this broke. So, why do you think that is?
I mean, I think that there is, Hannah Cho loves watching families on the internet. So do lots of people. But many, many, many more people love to see the downfall of someone that presented themselves as perfect and it's revealed that they're not. And none of us are perfect, but the internet always comes together to bring someone down. And so it just makes sense that sure, they had a niche audience that loved to see them succeed, but there are far more people out there who love to see them fail. And I just want to say one thing about the docuseries itself is I was very surprised. Without Hannah Cho, there really wasn't much to see. Like it was so important. Without her, even though there's tons of videos out there of their experience, we weren't really looking at much. It was really just kind of like talking heads. And I was very surprised by that. Like it was on this, like actually the content of what we viewed, it was quite boring. Like very, very sensationalistic story, but like as a docuseries, very boring.
Well, I think the docuseries also has to deal with the moral fine line. Like, when do we become the predatory knock-on content that is also, cannibalizing this story and then re-cannibalizing Huxley's story, right? So that, I mean, there's interesting layers in that sense of like, yeah, we don't want to like give the Huxleys too much of a platform. But speaking of the like this situation, the Stauffers, sorry, yeah. But speaking of like that situation, like Huxley, like the police did investigate the situation. They did report back that Huxley, he's safe in his new home and he's doing, he's finding the right conditions there. And Jen, I mean, I was just thinking of this final series episode, the final episode in the docuseries. I mean, they talked to a couple who also adopted a child with disabilities and then had to give him up. So what did you make of that moment?
I think it was very necessary because obviously the Stauffers were not in the series to speak for themselves after the fact. And so having a family that had experienced an adoption disruption or dissolution was actually really important. It's particularly one that weren't using their children for money. That's also a really important perspective to have because disruptions and dissolutions do happen, right? And statistics are never going to cover it because there are the kids who, decide to go live with their best friend when they're 14, or they're the adult children who decide not to speak to their adoptive family again. There's all sorts of disruptions and dissolutions that do happen. I will say that couple far less hateable, which was really important because I think that if we're set up to hate the Stauffers, which we are, it was really important for us to see a couple who might have felt the same feelings that the Stauffers were feeling, and for us to have at least a little bit of a reminder that they were also human beings who might have had complicated feelings around this. We don't know. I mean, the way the series is set up, all they care about is Cartier bracelets, but I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Emil, like I got 30 seconds here, but I just want to know, like, this whole industry, family vlogging, like how has it evolved since this Stauffer story?
Well, I think you see the sheer amount of content that they were posting, like they were sharing multiple videos a day, and we don't do that anymore. Like the really big, Ballerina Farm, Nara Smith, they are much more removed, much more strategic about what they share. And I think it's because we've learned the lesson from oversaturation, from oversharing. And momfluencers, family vloggers are far different today. They're much more removed. And a lot of them don't actually even show their children.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, listen, that's all the time we have. But listen, this is obviously such a hard series to watch, such a hard conversation to have, and I really appreciate both of you for having it with me.
Thank you.
Amil Niazi is a writer at The Cut, and she's in Toronto. Jen Sookfong Lee is an editor at ECW Press and author of books like Superfan and Good Mama on Paper. An update on our family is available now on Crave. I'm Radheyan Simonpillai, sitting in for Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This is Commotion. And now let's take a breath, shift gears, and have a look at a documentary that makes the case that disco never died. That was a bit of the disco classic Le Freak by Chic. It's featured in the new documentary Disco's Revenge, along with Chic guitarist Nile Rodgers, actor and singer Billy Porter, and DJs Grandmaster Flash and D Nice. The doc, which premiered on Crave last week, digs into the music's history, starting with disco's arrival on the heels of the civil rights movement in Stonewall, and its impact across genres and communities and generations. To walk us through that history and this film, we have writer and former MuchMusic VJ, Michael Williams. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good morning.
Good morning. Listen, Michael, I gotta say, I hate to admit this, but I'm one of those people who, when I think of disco, I think of giant mirror, the mirror balls, the flashy outfits, the Bee Gees, John Travolta, Saturday Night Fever. So I was surprised to find out that it really wasn't that at all, at least not in the beginning. So can you, just talk to me about what you remember about disco's origins?
Everything. I mean, it was the party. It was the party that happened in the basement. It started out with the blue lights and just a little record player, and the records would be stacked. The 45 would be stacked like 5 or 6 deep, and they would just drop, and in between people would chat and just dance. So it started at home, and then it moved out into public, and that's when you get into places like Stonewall and all of that. And it was always just a place to go. It was a community thing. They called it church in the film, and it really was church. People would just go there and be accepted and have a good time and dance to all kinds of music, because there wasn't disco music in the beginning. There was just music that you could dance to.
Yeah. And when you say like community, I mean, this is the music that became kind of a safe space for marginalized identities, right? Like,
the music became a safe space, and the places became a safe space. Yes.
Yeah, so specifically for like queer communities, Latinx communities, Black communities. Look, you were a well-known and well-respected DJ in Montreal, in the Montreal University and in bar scene at this time. How does the film resonate with your own experiences?
I found that there wasn't a lot of the Canadian experience, because Montreal was really like the sister city to New York. We had Robert Ouimet, who was one of the most famous DJs in the mid-'70s there when Donna Summers came out with I Feel Love. He was the one, actually, that it was a song called Can We Sit Down and Talk About It, which was a ballad which was being played in America. He took it and flipped it over, and it was I Feel Love, and got 2 copies of the 45 and made a 12-inch out of it live. He was a guy that broke that record, and I would have really liked for them to have represented Montreal and Canada very well, because Toronto also had a disco community, but in Montreal, it was magic.
Yeah. And so again, didn't know that. Also didn't know that there was this backlash that perhaps informed my own opinion of disco, a backlash against disco spearheaded by punk and rock fans. And so, it was a backlash that was called the disco demolition movement.
What happened was a guy named Steve Dahl was a DJ, and his radio station was a rock station, and it turned into a disco station. And what people should understand is that commercial radio, unlike the CBC, has no allegiance to any music. They have allegiance to money. So if they could get a 10 share and the advertisers would buy time, they would just do However, it doesn't. They would play Mary Had a Little Lamb all day. That's how radio really operates. And to the public, they think, oh, this station loves the rock and roll. This station loves disco. No, they have no love to it. They love money. So they only play the records to play the advertising.
Right.
If they could play advertising all the time, they absolutely would. Steve Dahl lost his job, and he decided to do this disco demolition thing, and that's when everything changed.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, look, like the movie is called Disco's Revenge, okay? And so, I mean, talk to me about what is the significance of that? Like, how is disco getting its revenge here?
Because it never died. It was always music to dance to. You know, there was always music to dance to in absolutely every culture. When I discovered disco, it was in Europe, because we called it something different in America. It was just a place in the black community where you would go and dance at a nightclub. But in Europe, the whole family went, and it was a different sort of thing. It was a different type. It was like the whole family, the whole community. If the band came to town, everybody came to see them. So Disco's Revenge is two things. One, it never ended. People always want to dance. And two, house music sort of continued that whole thing, which Eddie Grant started.
Okay, and is house music, or is there something else that like maybe is where we see disco's legacy appearing in the music and the culture today?
Disco's legacy is anything that people will dance to. And that's what it did. So it did the same thing it did with the community and the people that went there. They were gay, straight, strange, like Prince said, white, black, Puerto Rican, everybody just a freakin', right?
Yeah.
So we had that. It brought the community together, but it also brought the music together. Disco taught people how to produce records. Without disco, there would have never been Boss Skaggs' Lowdown.
And also hip hop.
And well, hip hop was coming. Hip hop was coming anyway.
Right.
Hip hop is to soul music what punk is to rock and roll.
Interesting. Okay.
DIY.
Yeah.
Do it yourself.
Well, listen. Like, I mean, what I appreciated about this documentary is how it kind of closed the circle on my understanding of house music, which Beyonce's Renaissance did, and then this one is like, you know, once again reminding us of the marginalized communities that created this music and who were perhaps removed from it after.
And the purpose that the music had in the community. And after the whole Steve Dahl thing in 79, I think it was, and the disco destruction and the backlash, what had to do less with the music, more with the people who listened to and enjoyed the music. Because it was in America, and everything in America has to do with race.
Right, exactly. Well, listen, I learned so much from this documentary. I learned so much from speaking to you, Michael Williams. Thank you so much for being here.
And if you're a disco fan, check out Jamie Kastner's film, a Canadian. It's called The Secret Disco Revolution.
There you go.
Very
Secret
good.
Disco Revolution. Follow up to Disco's Revenge, or
follow up to? Well, actually, it was done about 8 years ago, it came before.
I mean, okay. Well, perfect. Thank you again, Michael, for being here.
Thank you.
Okay. Michael Williams is a former MuchMusic VJ, host, producer, and writer. The documentary Disco's Revenge is available now on Crave.